Hello everyone and welcome to 𝗡𝗨𝗡 Underground. Today is June 15, 2022. Thank you so much for joining me, folks, to discover the truth beneath the surface. I really do appreciate everybody out there taking the time to listen. So today I'm going to do a deep dive on some 107 intel. I'm going to be talking a lot about hijacking consciousness, the transhuman agenda, the doomsday weapon of the enemy, and I'm gonna be getting into some analysis of 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏's work as well. So hopefully you folks are up for it. I hope you're having a wonderful day and that your week is off to a good start amidst all of this craziness. So let's just dig right in here. So as folks know, I've been very focused on the work of 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 and his interpretation of the intel coming from 107, who everybody knows I've been analyzing for some time now. Now, depending on which insider you listen to or which podcaster or commentators you resonate with, you tend to get a different perspective on what's actually happening right now, and more specifically, where this is all headed. Now, last night I had a really interesting discussion with Brad Olson, who really is of the opinion that there is some sort of a doomsday plan for the enemy that they are using or plan on using as their final card. And he happens to believe that it's very likely to be Project Bluebeam because of his knowledge of that technology and of course, as he references, Wernher von Braun on his deathbed actually confessed that this was to be the final move that the cabal was going to make against humanity. Now, I've heard a lot of discussion about Project Bluebeam, and although my research has led me to believe that the white hats have seized control of the satellites, that they would need to project these holograms in order to pull off this fake alien invasion, I do still think it's a possibility that we have to take very seriously. However, my research and my journey has always centered around the Q drops and more recently, the continuation or the rebranding of the Cube project on the McAfee Telegram channel. And I did a show not too long ago discussing how 107 and using the metaphor of the phoenix to describe how the enemy self-emulates in order to avoid detection and of course hold on to power. He actually implied, or didn't really imply, he just came out and said that the McAfee channel is the continuation or the phoenix of the Q project. Now, we've seen multiple posts from McAfee and this account that is hinting at a sky event, and the team is telling us to look to the sky. That's a quote, and reminds us that we're not done. And then we have 107 telling us that it's going to be a blast when this event happens, and he of course is referencing, I believe, the 5D Megatron ion avalanche that will be enabled by Tesla's 369 technology, which 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 refers to as the Rapture event. Now, we have seen some very strange footage over DC recently. I don't know if you folks have been paying as much attention to this as I have, but there have been some really strange appearances of light in certain areas over the DC swamp. Now, I've heard them characterized as portals being opened, which may be the case, but I've also heard others suggest, including 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏, that these are UFOs, which seem to be performing a strange flight pattern around the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. Now, you can watch 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏's videos for some footage on that, and I highly recommend you do it, as well as his commentary in the background. Now in addition to all this we have Monkey Works, who is documented, and I've talked about this as well, the air traffic over the East Coast and DC in particular, indicating that all of these C-130 transport planes suggest that there is a massive staging in preparation for an event of some kind. And if you go back and you watch his work starting in the beginning of April, you can see a pattern excuse me, which aligns itself very well with 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 around DC on April 11th. Now April 11th is the date that's referenced multiple times in the Q drops. And it also happens to be very well aligned with the DoD Law of War Manual 11-4, which provides the legal framework for an occupying power to legitimately engage any belligerent force which has failed to comply with the international laws governing occupation, in accordance with the Geneva Conventions as well, and specifically, here we're talking about the duty of this belligerent force to actually reveal to the people of the area being occupied who they actually are, who they actually work for, who they actually represent, which is organizational body, if you will. And I've gone into a significant amount of detail on how all of this is laid out in the Department of Defense Law of War Manual, Chapter 11, Section 3. We spent quite a bit of time talking about that, so to me, there is no question that the military is in position. And my belief at this point is less that they're waiting for people to wake up, and more that they're waiting for a specific lunar event or events to take place before the rest of all this plan can unfold. And as Jetson predicts, and I agree, the climactic moment of this epic struggle between good and evil will involve a doomsday event scenario, or as Juan puts it, a near-death experience, which is going to require not only Tesla technology but far more importantly the hand of God himself to save us. The question is, from what exactly? What attack plan could the enemy have in store for us that would require God to show his hand? But 107 has talked about a near-death experience, and I've been speculating along with many others as to what that could mean. And then possibly the activation of MK Ultra sleepers in mass to overwhelm society with false flag attacks like Gene Decode told us about. And we've been more recently discussing the food shortages. And some have even speculated that the enemy is going to attempt to starve us. And then of course there's the military action going on in Ukraine, which some fear could escalate and lead to thermonuclear war. Now all these scenarios represent, obviously, very real threats with which we're contending, but it wasn't until recently that I came across an interview that Juan did a while back, not sure exactly when it was. Some people in the audience might be able to help me out on that. But he was discussing an entirely different angle which I hadn't even been looking at. And the more I look into it, the more plausible it seems. Could the moon itself be a weapon? Is it storing something that the enemy plans to unleash on humanity at the right moment? And if so, what moment would that be? Well, recently Juan, who we all know, uses metaphors and biblical parables to better provide an understanding, I guess you could say, of where we are as well as hint at where we're headed. And recently he was talking about how the game of football was fundamentally changed when the NFL instituted the red flag rule, which of course is to review questionable calls. And he's characterized the enemy as trying to get to the line of scrimmage, to get off another play before the coach, as represented by we the people, can throw the red flag, to get an official review of how the vote went down. Now in this game, if you want to play along with this parallel, obviously the clock is ticking. We are in a race against time to somehow, some way, prevent the enemy from facing. Well, I guess you could say they're in a race against time to prevent themselves from facing any justice for stealing the election, and of course for so many other things. Now, as we've been discussing devolution, and Q has told us we have known all along that the military is the only solution. So while we can expect this drama to play out with the good guys trying to expose the crimes of the cabal in a civilian court, the reality is that the courts are a captured operation, along with pretty much every other institution in this matrix. So I don't expect to see any real justice emanating from a system that is corrupt and evil to the core. But what I think is that we are beginning to enter into the final stages of preparation for the climax of this pantomime that's been planned all along, and each side is getting ready to make their final moves. You've got the cabal readying their doomsday weapon, and then you've got the white hats preparing for the technical element of the rapture event, during which God will not only deliver humanity from evil, but has also prepared an entirely new beginning for mankind. Now, before I encountered 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's work, I had been envisioning this near-death experience that Juan talks about, like I said, through a very different lens than I'm beginning to now, because I had been operating under the assumption that after the storm, as we refer to it, that humanity would begin a golden age. But it would be here on Earth, which of course still may end up being true, but now I'm questioning that assumption more and more, in light of what Jetson is saying in relation to Juan's intel, and obviously how it correlates with the Q drops and the McAfee posts, which really are one and the same. Could it be that the plan was never to have humanity remain here on Earth? Is our ascension not only spiritual but physical, in the sense that we're going to be ascending to a new planet, a new home? And what would that look like? How would that be possible? Now, I've gone into detail in previous podcasts discussing Jetson's theory of the rapture event, but for the purposes of our discussion today, I'm not going to rehash all of it. You can go back and listen, and actually, probably better idea is just go listen to Jetson's work, watch his videos yourself, do your own research. But for the purposes of our discussion today, suffice to say that this timeline flip that is alluded to by Q and McAfee several times in coded messages will be a sound-driven event, using modernized, and you might even say militarized, Tesla technology. A 5D ion blast, which will sound like the trumpets of Revelation, is going to transform, according to this theory, a broad frequency range of humans into superconductors, at which point we will be capable of being levitated onto ascension support vehicles or spaceships and placed into light healing chambers to fully restore our DNA, and in the process really lift the veil so that we can begin to finally understand the truth of the real true nature of our existence and our history. and how we got here and where we're headed. So the fundamental belief here is that Earth as a free will zone became too infiltrated and corrupted, with evil for humanity to ever really have a fair chance at ascension on our own and collectively. Our discernment, and again not talking about the audience members but collectively talking about humanity, our discernment has been far too compromised in our genome, our DNA far too degraded for us to ever really unify against our true enemy. And so in order to save the Adamic bloodline, which essentially is Israel, remember the Q drops say we're saving Israel for last. We are Israel. McAfee pointed that out. We are being saved for last. So in order to save the bloodline of humanity, the Adamic bloodline, God is preparing the rapture in our journey to the new West in the Sirius star system. And so Jetson's videos explain that those leaving Earth will be the ones who unknowingly chose evil over good, and unknowingly is the key word. And the reason for that, of course, like I just mentioned, is because their discernment has been stolen, along with the good-hearted people out there who never devoted themselves to Christ and accepted Him as their Savior. Now this represents the bulk of humanity, at about 7 billion people. And the ones staying are the consciously evil, the wicked, and the saints, and the 144,000 starseeds that are here to assist humanity in the Great Awakening and make sure that our ascension actually happens. The saints and the starseeds, according to Jetson, will perform a collective mission during the Great Tribulation, and that really is consistent with Scripture, and they'll be protected by God or by the seal of God until their mission is complete, and then most of them will be martyred. And then, of course, we all know the end of the story. Jesus Christ returns at the end of the Great Tribulation to gather up His saints dead and alive, and to destroy the evil ones along with this entire realm once and for all. Now on some future shows I may do a more detailed breakdown of how this rapture event will take place from a technological standpoint, or I should say may take place. But essentially what's been happening is that the white hats have been using the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, in order to pummel the atmosphere with ions in preparation for this rapture event. And I also do believe that they will be using pyramids in order to generate the torsion energy, which I'm going to talk about in some more detail in a moment, that's necessary to create this 5D sound blast, which will likely emanate from Mayo Island. Folks will remember that. That's the island where they ran their tests that turned the sky blue back in 2018. But Jetson points out that the Giza complex, the pyramid complex, is actually a water magnetron microwave oscillator, in which there are 4 torsion energy shafts and oscillators which generate ionized particles that are going to be used for the rapture event.